Let's talk about the economy now. And President John Dramani Mahama earlier this week announced that Ghana and China are set to finalize a zero-tariff trade agreement by the end of October 2025. President Mahama explained that the zero-tariff policy would open up vast opportunities for Ghanaian exporters, agro-processors and manufacturers, helping to expand the country's access to the Chinese market. But how beneficial or otherwise would this deal be for businesses in Ghana and for Ghanaians in general? We're joined now for an analysis by Godfred Bokpin, Professor Godfred Bokpin. He's an economist and he's going to help us understand further this plan. Prof, you're welcome to ChannelOne Newsroom. I'm sure you have seen what the president said. What do you make of this development, even though discussions are still ongoing?
Well, thank you very much, my big boss, and good evening to our cherished listeners and viewers. Thank you. I mean, ordinarily, one could say this is good news. Whatever way you look at it, you can say good news. But whatever advantages or other benefits we talk about now, they will be more theoretical. They will be more theoretical, hypothetical. I'm saying so because translating the intended objectives, benefit into actual, depends more on the hard work that has to be done by our exporters. And here, when we talk about our exporters, we are talking about the kind of competitive advantage that we have also created to enable our exporters to be able to take advantage of such zero tariff. Remember that for trade to happen between countries, we have what we call documented tariffs, and then we have non-tariff barriers. Sometimes the non-tariff barriers are even more harder to navigate your way through compared to the tariff barriers that can easily be eliminated. And I'll try and break this down. So, for instance, when it comes to, remember that China is not signing this agreement exclusively with Ghana, right? There are other countries, there are even beyond the African continent, you talk about Asia and the rest of them. So the idea is that, yes, you may have this, but the question is, do you have that enabling environment to be able to produce at the standard that is required to access or to enter the Chinese market? And we don't need to think far. The answer will be no. The answer will be no. Because the point is that if you look at the Chinese market, so far, China relies more on Africa and Ghana for that matter, primarily for raw materials. So raw materials, non-tariff barriers, when it comes to standards and the rest of them, do not apply that much, okay? Do not impose severe restrictions on the export of raw materials or primary commodities like oil, like cocoa, and the rest of them, because they needed these ones to power their growing industries and stuff like that. And in fact, particularly for China, you can see that what the Europeans did with the Berlin Conference 1844-1845, with the partitioning of Africa, which was essentially to change the economic model of the African continent from food crops to cash crops. Cash crops essentially to serve their growing industries. So we were not producing cocoa that much and the rest of them. We were largely self-sufficient. Look, before the partitioning of Africa, Africa was largely food sufficient. But you realize that because they changed our economic model, what did they do? They brought in the idea of we growing what we will not eat. And so that we will import what we will eat. So we switched to producing cash crops, cocoa, the rest of them.
So, Prof, we became a producing ground for them. Now, that's maybe in the history and it's still continuing. Another fear now on this deal we are looking at is that we're going to move from being a producing ground to also a dumping ground as our markets will now be opened to them. Do you fear that our markets will be flooded with cheaper goods from China as a result?
The question is, should it get worse than what we have right now? If you do the analysis and you even take our textile industry, in fact, it was more because we opened our economies to China and the rest of them that led to the collapse of the textile industry. Check the data. And many of them, already Chinese goods are all over the place. What do we want next? For them to fly killy-willy on the street for us to buy? It's everywhere. Remember, not long ago, there was a pronouncement by the president that they were going to more or less like zero rate in terms of minimum capital to set up in Ghana. You remember that, all right? That was essentially to open up the retail market, even though government officials have come to deny that that wasn't the case and that they were revising the GIPC, the bill, to make it an authority or something and all of that. We look forward to the details of all of that. But remember that in fact, in the last 15 years, if you check the data, you will see that China has been deliberate to limit its exposure to the U.S. market, North America, because of their tensions, geopolitical, trade, whatever, with U.S. and then Canada. So the idea is that how do we reduce their exposure to U.S., North America? So they've been looking at ways to diversify. And they've been looking at Asia. In fact, they are making inroads within the Arab and the rest of them. But remember that now with Trump and winning back the heart of the Arabs, that presents a new dynamic when it comes to China and the rest of them. But so China is diversifying. They are looking at markets. Look, take note of this. It took China so long for them to have their currency accepted as part of the basket of reserve currencies that the IMF uses, what we call rights. Okay? The reason is that they felt that the Chinese currency was manipulated, artificially kept low, so as to boost their exports. So China had so much reserve, for which reason their currency could have been one of the best in the world, but they chose to keep a low exchange rate, right, or keep the exchange rate artificially weak, so to speak, right, so that it will enable them export more.
Okay.
Because they felt that the only way they could make it was this. So already we are not negotiating from position of strength. If you look at this tariff, even though we don't know the details, there hasn't been enough consultation with industry and all of them. But I don't think that we went into this negotiation from position of strength. No. I mean, China has the upper hand.
So you said that there's not been a lot of consultation with industry, but we have businesses to protect. How do you reckon our businesses can be protected by the government as this deal goes through?
Well, the way I see it, there isn't much that we can do because we still rely on China as a big development partner. Remember that this could actually be a bait, okay, in order for us to get other deals, okay, loans, infrastructure support, and the rest of them. So for me, that is how I see it. So the position I explained earlier was not to say we didn't negotiate hard or something. I understand that dynamics. We are from a more weaker position, so to speak. But I think that what we can do is to say that, okay, fine, this is what we have, but how do we prop up our local industry? That is going to take a while. A lot depends on the fiscal discipline and then the monetary policy that we put in place that can enable our firms to also produce competitively. I could just give you a couple of examples. If somebody, an indigenous business borrows in Ghana, you are looking at average lending rate of between 20 to 27%. Others are even borrowing in excess of 30%. In China, it's around 3.08%, right? If you look at the cost of electricity to them as a business input cost, and you compare that to Ghana, in fact, I said somewhere that the distance between Beijing and Shanghai is over 1,200 kilometers. A train could do it in less than 5 hours. And the rest of them. Meanwhile, the distance between Accra and Kumasi is 250 kilometers or so. It may take you more than 7 hours, and you may not arrive. In fact, you just have to travel from here to Takrady. By the time you exit Apam or so, it may look as though you just came out of a Galamsey pit. And the rest of so the restrictions are such that regardless of the zero tariffs we negotiate and the rest of them, there is no way we'll be able to take advantage. The other bit also is that as a country, we are not driven by standards. No, not at all. In this country, bread doesn't have an expiring date. Egg doesn't have an expiring date. Basic things, right? We are not driven by that. We are happily polluting our water bodies. We are destroying the soil that can produce non-traditional exports and the rest of them. So sometimes they can give you this access in terms of zero tariff, but non-tariff barriers, standards, and the rest of them could actually inhibit you from accessing the market. You remember AGUA, right?
Yeah.
AGUA.
America.
We were not able to access all the opportunities. In fact, as we speak right now, under the guided trade initiative, Ghana hasn't done well. Under the African Continental Free Trade, we have not. In fact, Ghana has issued a bit more certificates, of participation, but actual trade, we are far behind. Because the point is standards. We are not. In fact, if you talk to Ghana Standards Authority, how many firms producing in Ghana here actually have standards embellished on them, either ISO 14 or something in there? We are not driven by that. Unless we need to do all of this, then we can say that, yes, we can take advantage of all of that. For now, less time, it will be in the book. They will have access. Remember, it's not only Ghana. They are looking at the African continent and beyond. China wants to diversify. It's as simple as that.
Thank you so much for your time, Prof.
God bless you.
God bless you too. That's Professor Godfred Bokpin, an economist. This is Channel One Newsroom.